and execute episode 66 of Nintendo Therapy, a show about the latest Nintendo news and rumors, as well as a celebration of all things Nintendo, now on YouTube and now being recorded off of our old podcast hoster there. So we should have, well, I don't know if we'll have less bugs in the future because we'll be learning a new thing, but we won't have the same bugs anymore. My name is Kevin, and with me this week to talk about Labo and rumors and news and all kinds of Nintendo stuff is Harrison.
That's right, Labo news this week. Or, not to be too confused with you, don't worry about it, listeners. We have a big episode for you this week.
Yeah, there's
we have.
It's funny. There's so many weeks that there's like almost nothing to talk about, which is why we create our segments. And then there's some weeks where it feels like Nintendo wants to have all the news at once.
Right, and the way that Nintendo deals with news is, well, I hope they never change. And it seems like they're never going to change, but I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Before we jump in too much, did we have any small talk before we start?
I mean, everything that I want to talk about is kind of these breaking news stories that have been coming out in between our two records. Like, I'm really excited to talk about Switch 2 stuff, and I mean, I started playing Animal Crossing, which I told you this week. Really digging that. Shouldn't have put it off as long as I did, but really enjoying it, and kind of hoping the Switch 2 has a new Animal Crossing within that first year, now that I'm really back in the groove of things. And yeah, playing Metroid Dread as well, which is, now that I've gotten pretty deep into it, I can see it's basically Metal Gear Solid meets Metroid, which is a great combination.
Yeah, it's great. What do you think of the performance of that game?
I mean, I'm not one who notices like frame rates or anything like that, if that's what you're talking about. I'm not like really good at noticing that stuff, but the combat is amazing. Like, and there are segments of it where you just feel, it makes you feel like you're really good at the game, whether you are or not, where you're just like, you run, you jump, you hit that like block counter when something swoops down at you, and then you slide under a surface, and it's just like it's very fluid, the movement, and you just feel like Samus on screen is doing whatever you're thinking. You're executing it right away. So I thought it was really good at that.
I think that's what I meant.
Okay.
Like everything, I think like everything in that game feels real fluid. I'm not sure what you mean by this. It makes you feel like you're good at the game, because I did not feel that throughout my entire playthrough.
Okay. No, there's sections, I mean, where you'll parry something correctly, and then you'll just slide and run, and before long you're running into something that kills you, but there'll be like a few seconds there where you're like, oh, I could have put that clip on the internet. That made me look good right there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's jump in. Let's jump in, Kevin.
Yeah, so I'm sure everyone who loves Nintendo and follows things like Nintendo podcasts like us, you are probably aware that Nintendo started officially confirming, I guess you could say, that there's a Switch 2 successor out there. Up until now, it's been nothing but rumors, and Nintendo saying things like, oh, we're always working on stuff, haha, JK. And now they have finally officially put out a tweet where they announced that they're not going to announce it. Basically, they said, hey guys, the Nintendo Switch successor is coming. We'll be talking about that soon, but we're not going to be talking about it in the June Direct, which is a very weird way to announce something, is to tell us when they're not going to talk about it. So when will it be? Who knows? We know it won't be in the June Direct, and that also indirectly confirmed that there will be a June Direct, which we never really get confirmations of these things ahead of time. They just kind of drop a tweet and say, hey, Wednesday, there's going to be a Direct, So, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, even though we always assumed there's going to be a June Direct. Like,
Yeah.
so that's true. And this is another example of Nintendo saying like I told you when the Animal Crossing big update dropped and the DLC dropped, Nintendo put out there, this is going to be our only update. This is it. Like they put that out there for everyone to see when the update drops. Kind of like if like your parents were to take you to the store and they were to say in the parking lot, don't ask me for anything. We're going to go in the store. Do not ask me for anything. So that's what it kind of reminded me of. But I'm not convinced that we're not going to hear anything in the
Well, that
June
was
Direct.
and in the
Go ahead.
June Direct. I was going to say that they had a second tweet where they basically said we're going to release news about the Switch successor in waves, I think was the term they used. Like,
Right.
so they clearly have the whole marketing planned out at this point. So yeah, maybe there'll be something in there. I think it'll be very similar to the Switch, where maybe in the June Direct, maybe a week or two after the June Direct, we'll get a code name for the project or even the official name for what it is. And then I think by the time we hit a September Direct, they'll be in full force and actually displaying the thing.
I have no idea what a September Direct is going to look like. Because I think like because if you're looking at the eShop, there's nothing. Like
Yeah.
the only thing in that portion are indie games that have already been announced, most likely in a direct, like already. I don't think we're going to get Pokemon news because that's usually a separate presentation. Um,
Well, the
and
big prediction on everyone's mind right now, I've seen a few people talking about this week, is basically if we don't get any news about Wind Waker Twilight Princess in this June Direct, it's not happening. Like this is their like last opportunity to say that, because we know the Direct after this will probably be mostly focused on the new stuff. So it's anybody's guess if it's going to happen. I mean, they could at this point release those games for the Switch successor, but who knows? I that was my first thought when I heard all this news, though, is I was like, okay, then that means this is probably the last Direct where that is possible to hear news on those two games.
yeah, I'm
But I
okay.
think that is
This
what it's.
ca-
Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but
Go ahead.
you mentioned not knowing what it's going to be in September and going forward, and I think we are going to start seeing basically just a slew of stuff. If we don't get Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, we're going to get stuff like it. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they announce, because in June they could do the June Direct after Luigi's Mansion 2 has already released, and then announce that they're also doing a remake of the original Luigi's Mansion, like something like that. It's going to be a lot of remakes and a lot of stuff like that.
Okay, this is going kind of into the rumors, so I'm going to circle back around to it because we're not there yet. I think this September Direct, it could be a big focus on the holiday season. Like what this last holiday season is going to look like. But yeah, I think we're going to get news in September. And I wouldn't be surprised if between June and September we get some of that. Like I don't know if I forget when PAX East is. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo goes to some of these summer video game conventions or whatever and shows off a new system and we get some like underground like behind the scenes reporting. Just like little like sprinkles that like Nintendo is going to throw on us. And just yeah, like it's just they're this huge the biggest company in Japan, which is crazy to say out loud. It's like they're the biggest company in Japan, and the way they announce this new hardware is like they made a random tweet on one of their official accounts about the new hardware. It's just all very silly. Um, So I do have a few rumors.
Yeah, let's get into those. We might as well, like since they're all
You
on
know
the
what?
same topic.
Yeah, it's all the same topic. So I'll go in order. These come from different sources, but the three I'm going to bring up were all brought to my attention by Central Leaks. So shout out to them. Uh, First one I have here is that according to people at Famaboards, which I could not access yesterday for some reason. I don't know if they got shut down or something. um, they've been tracking shipments between Nintendo and Nvidia, and they have some new details that came out from a shipment from basically of March of this year. And according to these reports, the Switch 2 or the Switch successor will have 12 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabytes of internal storage. Will have a built-in microphone, um, and that's basically where the rumor ends. And
The
more
built-in
about the
microphone
process.
makes sense because there have been a lot of rumors about the camera, so that kind of goes hand in hand with the camera.
Um, and this, I'll just start by saying, I believe this is why Reddit exists. Like Reddit does not exist for the geopolitical, for the, let's get like real deep into like these important debates. No. Reddit is for like crazy, crazy data miners, crazy fans that are like tracking these shipments between these companies. It's a pretty like it's a rumor technically, but it's a pretty reliable source, and everything kind of points towards a Switch successor. Like, why
Mhm.
would Nintendo be, importing all of these chips and processors? What for? But
Well,
this
I
is
wonder
way
if
different.
going to the 256 gigabytes of internal storage, and I see your note here about the original rumors were for only 64 gigs of storage. I wonder if it's possible the Wii U launched with two different models, one with more internal storage. So I wonder if they might go back to that model. Though it seems like the base model of the Wii U, as little as the Wii U sold, the base model sold even less. I think the version with the bigger hard drive actually sold the most. Um, so yeah, it would be interesting if they gave that's kind of a big discrepancy between 64 and 256, but who knows?
It is a big discrepancy, but at the same time, I want to say that it's not, because let's say the difference is $400 and $450. Um, I don't know what I would get, because I could easily say, well, I already have a 256 or 512 SIM
Mhm.
card that I'm gonna throw in here. I'm gonna throw in here already. So I don't know what I would do, since storage is so cheap. I'd probably opt for the $50 more. But the 12 gigabytes of RAM, like what's in the current Switch? 4? 2? Like 12 is a
Mhm.
lot. 12 is like for a handheld? I don't think my Steam Deck has that. So I'm kind of thinking like, Nintendo, are you actually gonna like overachieve on this or
Yeah, blow some
overperform
minds on
on,
this one.
like, because this is because it would be a handheld console that would have more memory than like a Series S, which which runs great. Like we're going to be flying
Yeah, and that
if
would be
that's
something
true.
that could turn a lot of the haters online who are definitely there's going to be people when this thing announces who automatically put it down and compare it to the Steam Deck and things like that. And if it could have specs like that, it would be, something to impress even those types of people. I looked it up real quick, by the way. The basic Wii U launched with 8 GB of internal storage, and the premium had
Right.
32. How
Right.
far we've
Yeah.
come.
Yeah. And like not that long ago, not too
Exactly.
long ago.
Yeah.
And really, so uh, it it better have quick resume. Like if we're gonna have 12 gigabytes of RAM, I better
Mhm.
be able to open 2 games at one time. Like I better be able to like scroll through the eShop without having to close my
That's
online game.
yeah.
Like
That's a
I
big deal. Forget online games. Sometimes the eShop struggles if you're just playing a regular game. You got
just
to
playing a
close all your
regular
software.
just playing a regular game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is I've it is possibly my worst online experience of anything I deal with. Besides maybe like NBA League Pass, it might be like my worst online experience. Like I'm very like every time I go on there, it's like an agenda. Like I'm not going on there for leisure. I'm just going on there to get what I need. So that is rumor number one. Um, Second rumor comes from a Brazilian streamer TVPH. Apparently a big deal because a lot of people are reporting on it as well. He reported in a video that the Switch 2 is planned to release in March 2025. To expect more information about the console in the fall, possibly September.
Mhm.
More remasters will be revealed in the June Direct, and this will be the last Direct that is focused mainly on the the Switch we have now. There's an indie world planned for August. There are some third-party games confirmed for Switch 2, which we'll see as early as the second half of this year, and reiterates that Switch 2 will have backwards compatibility for both physical and digital games.
I feel like that's almost
Uh,
guaranteed at this point. Like
at this point,
it's
right?
been said by so many different rumor sources that it would just like Nintendo would have to run damage control at this point if it weren't true because so many people are expecting it by by how many times it's been reported. So they almost have to do it that way.
Right. So this is pointing. I mean, the part that I want to talk about with this rumor is that this rumor is really pointing towards we're getting more remasters and we're going to be hearing about them very, very soon. So I would expect that while we get news on the Switch successor, we're going to be getting news on new games, and remasters that will be coming out on the Switch 2 very, very soon, like this year.
So while they're rumoring this, I should say, not announcing, but while they're rumoring this, what are some remasters that you would like to see them announce? I'm thinking about this right now. Besides Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, I'm thinking, like I said, I would love for them to announce the original Luigi's Mansion, even though it's only like a 5 hour game. There's plenty to be done there, and it would be great to have the full trilogy in one place, just like they did for the Pikmin games. You could have all four on one system. Um, and I think Super Paper Mario would kind of go along with how they've been announcing the Paper Mario, the Super Mario RPG, and then a few directs later, we got Thousand Year Door announced, and now Thousand Year Door will be released, and a few directs later, we could get Super Paper Mario announced. So that would be another good one to have too. I don't know what else. What would you think?
A Link Between Worlds
Yeah,
is
I thought
is
of
where
that
I'm
too.
going.
Yeah. I've said that on here before too, is like they really need to make that more available because at this point it's only available on a dead console. Which, the eShop, everything is shut down. So the only way to play that now, you're basically supporting people who are selling it third or not third party. What are you selling it on the secondhand market? That's what I'm trying to say. Like you're supporting the people who are going to price gouge you because you can only buy a physical copy of it now and buy it from people who are selling it. So make more games available officially, Nintendo, and that's one of them.
Right. I mean, I've talked about it on here quite a bit. That would be, I mean, just for my selfish reasons, that would be my number one pick. It's not a game that I've played, and I would love to see. I think the original, as far as the artwork goes, has held up great. But
Hmm.
man, I would love to see an Unreal Engine version of that game, or just like what we saw with Link's Awakening. Just do that with Link Between Worlds, and I think I'd be thrilled to have it. Uh,
It's with the remasters, it's tough to think back on anything older than 3DS or DS generation because at that point you're thinking, well, they would just put it on the what is it? Why am I blanking on this? They would put it on Nintendo Switch Online if they wanted to draw
mhm.
attention to something else, but then that's not what they did with Super Mario RPG. They remade it, so you never know. They could do like a remake of a Super Nintendo game, You could get something crazy like that. So, who knows? Super
I don't,
Mario World HD. Something like
I
that.
don't, I don't know how much it matters. I really don't. Like if if Mario RPG was on Switch Online before before the remaster, before the announcement or whatever, would it really have like affected their sales of that game? I think
I
I
don't
think a
think
lot
by
of people
much. No.
yeah, I think a lot of people who bought that game would have bought that game even if they had played it on the Switch Online service. Because
Hmm.
it's new. It's like it's the same reason why I've played Generation 1 Pokemon like I don't know how many times. Too many times. Way too many times, you know? Like
Oh, and what's worth mentioning in this conversation is that rumored remake of the GameCube F-Zero game. That's people have been rumoring that for about a year now, so
mhm.
that could be announced. Especially since they've had a very big focus on F-Zero lately with F-Zero 99 and then dropping the Game Boy Advance F-Zero game recently on Switch Online. They're definitely trying to remind people F-Zero exists.
I can see that. And I have lots of developers in mind if they ever want to do that because yeah, I mean F Zero created a whole subgenre that is still I would say pretty popular
Hmm.
that they're not really well they're involved in now because they did release like F Zero 99 and yeah could we see would Nintendo be interested in doing another racing game? I'd be cool with that. Anything sports related, honestly. You know,
I'm gonna
anything
make that
sports
my pick.
related with good content.
I'm gonna
Okay.
make that my pick. F-Zero GX remake confirmed June Direct.
Confirmed June Direct. I put on our notes. I will be surprised if we do not see Tears of the Kingdom DLC. I think it's
Oh,
coming.
didn't they say they weren't doing DLC for Tears of the Kingdom though?
Are they not?
I don't know. I thought they said
Because
that, but then again, they've said things that aren't true in the past, so who knows?
why would they not? Like, oh, but
I'm
I
just gonna
might.
Google that real quick.
I mean, I can be totally wrong, and that's the great part about this podcast. I can be wrong about everything. But I mean, that game sold
Yeah.
extremely well.
Anuma apparently said it. I don't know what this is in response to when it says in an emailed response, so maybe to an interview. I don't know. Anuma wrote that in Tears of the Kingdom, We were able to implement all of the elements that we wanted to achieve in this world and story, and so there will not be any DLC. September 13th, 2023.
Never mind. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Well, I mean that makes sense because it is it is saturated for sure. But I don't know. Like, it's always the assumption of like if you make something that makes $1 billion, you're gonna keep making it. You know, it's
I
like
think they're
when
already on to the next Zelda game, and I'm not saying it's going to be anytime soon. It's not going to be a Switch 2 launch title or anything, but I think 3/4 of the way into Tears of the Kingdom, part of the decision of no DLC is they were like, all right, we did enough with this Breath of the Wild engine. It's time to start work on something else.
oh yeah, especially because the next game is going to be something completely new. Um, well, I shouldn't say that. It's going to be new as far as like they're moving on from
Yeah, new
the
art
Breath of the Wild.
style, new world, probably a lot of the same mechanics coming back though.
Probably still open world. You know,
Yeah.
probably still exploration and that sort of focus. So yeah, I will do my last rumor. Then we move on. Last rumor is a little bit short. Also coming from Central Leaks. According to their sources, there are 3 Pokemon games that are greenlit in development for the Switch successor. That's all. That's as far as that rumor goes. And you could say it's a pretty easy rumor. You know, like from what I think, from what we just talked about with Zelda, uh, they're probably always developing technically new games. There's no indicator on what those games could be. Uh, you could probably guess that it would be Generation 10, and Generation 10 could coincide with the 30-year anniversary. You could assume that one of the games is a remake, and the next remake coming up would be Black and White. And then, who knows? It could be
Yeah, does 3
Poke-
games mean 3 different, like, does it mean black, white, and whatever their third counterpart was? Or does it mean like black and white is one, red and green, I don't know, is another? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like how do they divide the games up in terms of that?
right. So I think those first 2 I think are pretty easy to predict. You know, we're getting Gen 10, and it would make sense to match up Generation 10 with the 30-year anniversary. We know we're going to get a remake, and they always go in order. So Black and White would be next. We can assume that, but we also don't know, like, what will it look like? You know, will it look like Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and then from there, like, it could be just a new Pokemon Home. It could be that the Legends game, the Legends ZA game that they announced, will be released on both consoles. There's a lot. It could be a new game altogether. There are tons of options there, but the rumor stops there. You know, the games are in development.
Yeah, I can't wait now that I'm back into Pokemon with Violet, and um I think I'm definitely going to be checking out Arcurious at some point. And I'm just like fully back into Pokemon at this point. I think each new release, I'm going to be right there with them. So bring it on. I'm ready. If it's black and white, that'll be cool because that is the generation that I randomly dipped in on in the middle. It's like I played Pokemon Blue, and then I didn't play anything until Black. So I did Black and Blue. Interesting combination. And then I didn't do anything until Violet. So I'm ready. Bring it on.
I would definitely recommend Arceus. I think Arceus is is it? It might be like the only legit good Pokemon game of this generation, and that's controversial to say, but that's my opinion because Scarlet and Violet was fun, was not a good game. Sword and Shield, a lot of people like. I hated it. The Let's Go series, I liked it. Pretty boring though. Um,
Yeah,
I don't know,
how do you
but
say it? Arceus? Either way,
Arceus,
it's on my
yeah,
wish list.
yeah.
Still trying to knock out all my backlog before Switch 2 drops with these random games I get here and there, like Animal Crossing and stuff mixed in. But yeah, I think I'm gonna have my backlog knocked out by the time the Switch 2 drops. So uh, I don't know where Arceus will fit in there, but I'll get it in there somewhere.
And if
Um,
not, everything's backwards compatible.
yeah, exactly.
And perhaps actually the last thing I wanted to say before I this is the last part of this section is we've talked a lot about backwards compatibility. Have you thought any further about what that could look like? Like we talked a while ago about possibly seeing games that are just going to maybe perform better on a new system, or
Mhm.
what if we got Breath of the Wild 4K, like if you own the game, you can get this performance upgrade on this new system. Have you thought about what that could possibly look like?
Performance wise, no. The only thing the only thing I've really like seen it as in my mind's eye is like going back to the Wii U, how you could transfer your entire Wii system over to the Wii U. And then the 3DS, I think, did that for DS, or maybe I'm thinking of my DS and my DSi. I don't know, but like I remember transferring system data. And beyond thinking of it that way, I haven't really thought about performance or anything like that. So that it'll be interesting to see. Again, I don't know if I'm just not observant, but like I'm not one who notices like frame rate drops or like when there's pretty bad for me to notice it. So as far as performance, I did see a little bit of it in Pokemon Violet, going back to that. So like maybe it'll perform better on a system with more RAM and more you know more under the hood. But yeah, I don't know if that would be something you'd have to toggle or what.
I just keep imagining like Breath of the Wild, upgrade or something, and I'm just thinking like 'cause I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I'm just thinking about how I need to finish Tears of the Kingdom so that if at any point I feel like I need to go back to Breath of the Wild, I can. But I can't go
Hmm.
back to Breath of the Wild until I finish Tears of the Kingdom.
I need to
But
finish it too.
th-
I'm just upgrading my armor. That's all I got to do, and then I'm done. I put almost 200 hours in at this point. I literally I folded and I ended up doing everything in this game. Like I found all the wells. I did every side quest. Which I told myself I wasn't going to do, but the completionist in me took over, and now I'm like 200 hours in and almost ready to end.
that's great. I mean, if you're enjoying it, then
Yeah, I
that's
would actually say it did a better job than Breath of the Wild of making the collectibles um obtainable. Like you don't have to hunt as hard for stuff when you're leveling armor and things like that. So I think that went a long way in keeping me doing things. But we digress.
yeah. I just need to finish it because yeah. Breath of the Wild was like it was one of those games for me where I'd be like on a plane or something, and
Hmm.
I'd be like, okay, I'll just play like the first part of Breath of the Wild, and it was always this game like the last couple of years where it was like I wasn't really playing it, but then at some point I'd be like, oh, I'm actually playing this game now. Like I'm 20 shrines in, and like
Yeah.
I'm getting ready for the first divine beast. Like I'm legit like I'm in this game. I'm in this game now.
Now, see, I
So
would do things instead of starting a file. What I would do is be like, I'm on a plane. I'm going to spend some time collecting smotherwing butterflies or things like that. Um, but Everyone's got their own way of playing.
I
So,
digress as well. Let's
yeah.
go.
Next up on the docket, another news story from this week. Nintendo Switch era profits are now more than all other Nintendo eras combined. So, first off, that kind of tells you I've seen a lot of people comparing already the Switch 2 to the Wii U and saying, like, well, when Nintendo had the Wii as a success, they bombed with the Wii U. So, like, if they do that again, it's going to be bad for them. This is nothing like the Wii U situation. They could the Nintendo Switch has outperformed the Nintendo Wii to such a they're in such a they're in a much stronger position now. Um and I don't want to say they could handle a failure, but it would not be the same effect as the Wii U was. So just getting that out of the way. The Nintendo Switch has been very successful. In fact, it's been such a success that is still breaking records and reaching milestones. Um, Nintendo Switch is now getting rather close to reaching the lifetime sales of Sony's PlayStation 2 without a price drop, by the way. That's not written here. I'm adding that in. Like they still haven't had a price drop, which is almost definitely coming when the next system does, which will almost definitely move some systems for people who are on the fence. So Nintendo's made a lot of money during the Switch era, but it may surprise you just how much they've earned. Earlier today, during Nintendo's financial results briefing, they shared the latest data on the company's profits, including how much they earned in the previous fiscal year. Thanks to the last fiscal year, they have now reached a point where Nintendo has now profited more during the Switch era than any other Nintendo console era combined. You can see a tweet relaying the news down below. You don't really need to hear that. But yeah, they making money.
Right, and for context, because this is the part that I had to look up. If you do adjust it for inflation, it's still more.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's the part that really struck me because I thought, like, of course it's more.
And I think a
Like,
big part of this is not only the install base obviously has helped every single title sell like over 5 million copies, but if anyone out there is still complaining about like, oh, HD remakes and remasters, they work. That's part of what's helping Nintendo so much right now is in between big releases doing those HD remasters. So, I mean, it's part of 50 things they're doing correctly, but it's definitely a part of it.
yeah. So we don't talk. I mean, on here we talk a lot about like units sold, and we don't talk too much about profits. I don't think, because it's more like I think it's more based on like the business side of Nintendo and like how much money Nintendo has. But I want to bring up also that, uh, like, for example, the Switch in the first 4 years from 2017 to 2020 had more operating profits than uh, PlayStation did from 2010 to 2020. So basically, the Switch made more in operating profits, like adjusted for how much they spend on developing everything in 4 years than PlayStation did in 10 years. And Nintendo, as you've mentioned, they've kind of had a pretty consistent, uh, like how they make profits. They have a pretty consistent business plan, is what I'm trying to say. Like,
Yeah. Well, the one thing
they
people rag on them for a lot is how they stay with these older technology. Like the Nintendo system hasn't been the most powerful console on the market in a few generations now, but that's what allows them to make things so cheaply. So the fact that a Nintendo Switch is only as powerful as a PlayStation 3 actually helps them in that making games that are of PlayStation 3 quality right now for developers is very profitable. So I know that I know I've seen them mention that helping them a lot.
I guess what I'm trying to get to, and I'm getting to it very poorly,
Oh, okay.
is that I think we don't talk about profits too much on here because profits really impact, the business side. And I usually try to remain more consumer focused, consumer based. Uh, do you think the profit models of Nintendo? Do you think the way Nintendo does things benefits consumers in the long run?
Uh, about benefits consumers, I think they part of their business plan is to keep a steady flow of games people want to play. So I would say that's a good benefit to consumers because going back to the HD remakes and remasters and stuff, they tend to fold out their calendar, making sure that in between new stuff like a Breath of the Wild or I don't know, Kirby, the Forgotten Land, like things like that. In between the new stuff, they do dole out plenty of nostalgia bombs. So I think their business plan really does benefit all the players, and it shows in their sales. I mean, you don't. It's this age old debate that what's more important, graphics, story, or gameplay. Those are the three that I always see on the pyramid being compared. And I think Nintendo fans view it as gameplay is the most important thing. Just make me a fun game. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what the story is. I think people who play PlayStation tend to prefer graphics or story over the gameplay. And that blows my I know I'm going off on a tangent here and this isn't really what you asked, but that blows my mind when I see people saying story is the most important thing. And it's like, really? So if a game had the worst controls you've ever picked up and none of the gameplay was fun, all you were doing was like drawing a line from point A to point B, and that was all the gameplay, but the story was amazing. Like at that point, you messed up as a developer. At that point, you should have made a movie because you had no ideas for a game. But anyway, I digress. Yes, I think Nintendo. I think what Nintendo does is great for consumers because they're constantly keeping in mind what do people want to play right now.
Yeah, because I'm usually cynical. And that's why I think perhaps we haven't talked about profits too much because I don't really care too much about Nintendo like as a business. I try to treat businesses like I'm not trying to have like a like a parasocial relationship with it. Like if Nintendo makes bad decisions, I'm sorry, when they make bad decisions, I want to point that out, and I think that we're pretty consistent about that on here. But like Nintendo, they drive me crazy sometimes with what they do. But then they'll release games like Mario Wonder, and it'll bring me like right back to like why I
Mhm.
love this company because they're able to just create magic out of like the resources that they have. So it's kind of like if you're giving me what I want to play, then I guess it doesn't really. The rest of it is kind of secondary. And to your point, Kevin, like people should just watch movies if they care more about how a game looks and what the story of a game is. You cannot point me to a game that is good but has horrible gameplay and a good story. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. There are tons of games that look beautiful but are bad. But
Mhm.
there are tons of games that are great, have great gameplay, and look decent. Because it's 2024, like we don't care at this point. Like as far as graphic styles, as far as artwork goes, there's audiences for everything now. So I don't think it matters.
Mhm. I agree.
So So my eventing is done now.
Okay, so there were two other news things in the mix before we get to our spotlight game. The I just wanted to touch on them real quick. We don't have to say much, but I
Sure.
saw that Rocket Knight Adventures Resparked has been announced to be coming in June for the Nintendo Switch. And when I saw that, I was just kind of bummed because I was like, oh, that means we probably won't be seeing any of the Rocket Knight Adventure games on Switch Online, which is something I was waiting for. I was waiting for a Genesis update with those, and I guess we're not going to see that. Just pointing it out. But if you like Rocket Knight Adventures and you were waiting for them to show up on Switch Online, they got this collection for you. Go grab it. June 11th. Looks pretty good. And the other thing is, I just wanted to point out that the rumor we reported last week, there was a leaker who said some news was coming with the Nintendo World Championships cartridge. It was right. So Nintendo announced this week the Nintendo World Champions collection. I don't know what it's called, but yeah, it's you can pre-order it now. It's not really my thing because it's basically just a bunch of speedrun mini games. I would prefer something more like NES Remix, but yeah, it's out there if you want it. So and they got some pretty cool box sets with all kinds of like mini posters and stuff like that. So go check that out if you're into speedrunning games.
Definitely cool. Definitely cool. Yeah.
And I think
And are we doing the mistake today? It's a pretty short one.
yeah, we could just read through it because I think there's a clear-cut winner in this. You're right, we can do that. So, and if we run long on this, we can just postpone Sonic the Hedgehog to next week. So if anyone's tuning into us for the first time, we've been doing this bracket tournament where we've been comparing all of Nintendo's biggest mistakes, facing them off against each other, 1 versus 1. And by the end of the tournament, we are going to have determined what Nintendo's biggest mistake was. So previous matches have included Mortal Kombat having no blood on the Super Nintendo, to Nintendo lending their characters to the CDI. That was a mistake. Winner there was Mortal Kombat. And then we had another discussion about the 3DS launch versus Nintendo 64 sticking with cartridges. 3DS launch was the bigger mistake in that matchup. And now this week, because Sean's not here, we're skipping the one we were going to do and we're going to the next matchup, which is Nintendo giving up on Sony Play Station, 2 words, or the mistake of the Nintendo Labo. So let me give some descriptions of both real quick. Just going to scroll to it here. PlayStation, where are you? There's a Philips CDI one. Here we go. So first, one thing I want to clear up as a misconception I see in a lot of places is I think at this point everyone knows Nintendo was working on a collaboration with Sony during the Super Nintendo era, and it was going to be called the PlayStation, as 2 words, PlayStation. And I've seen this mistakenly reported sometimes as a SNES CD, kind of like the Sega CD, which was a different project they had going on altogether, because they were trying to work on that as well. That also never ended up happening. But the PlayStation was going to be its own standalone system with CD-based games that was also compatible with Super Nintendo cartridges. So it would have been this weird, like, third-party system that played Nintendo games, basically. And the proposed contracts would have given Sony complete control over any games made for the CD element of the system, which obviously Nintendo didn't really like. They wanted control over their games. So Nintendo started talking with Philips in the background there, and that's what led to that mistake that we already discussed. And as a result, when Sony found out, they didn't want to work with Nintendo anymore either. And Nintendo may have created their biggest, well, they definitely created their biggest competitor when Sony launched the PlayStation as 1 word. And it obviously didn't play Super Nintendo games. And it's that versus the Nintendo Labo, which people may have forgotten about. It was these like cardboard accessories for different games made for the Nintendo Switch. I don't have a whole lot to say about the Nintendo Labo. Maybe you can go
Oh,
into
sure.
more
Oh, sure.
depth on that.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll include that in its first year, and this came out. Did it come out? I guess it came out the first year the Switch came out as well.
Yeah, I think
It's
so.
so it sold under 1 million units in its first year, and I think when it first released, it had there was like a $65 version, and then there was like a $75 version. So if you wanted all of it, I guess you had to pay like over $100. Under 1 million units is, especially with how early on and the lack of software we had at this point, uh I think that's pretty bad. But
Yeah, this
since
was a
you don't
point
have
where
much,
people were hungry for Switch anything, and they
yeah.
basically ignored. They were like, not that. Like, I need something new for my Switch, but not that."
And Labo always reminded me of something where it's like, if I saw Nintendo Labo when I was like 12 years old, I would have thought it was like the coolest thing. Like I can make a robot like with my video
Mhm.
game, and I bet my parents would look at it and be like, it's cardboard.
Yeah,
Like it's going, like if it gets wet, it's gone. Like you're not going to pay $70 for cardboard.
and I
So
think that's
I think
exactly the attitude at the time. Is a lot of gamers were like, "Okay, how long is this gonna last?" I'm gonna spend, like you said, I could spend up to $100 on this thing, and next year, am I even gonna be able to play with it? Like, is it gonna bend? Is it gonna get all crunchy? Like, how long is this gonna hold up? I mean, one of the things that I always looked at with it was, they had the fishing pole, and I was always
mhm.
like, does the string on the fishing pole, is that gonna get, too tight? You could start bending the cardboard back. Not not it doesn't fill you with a lot of faith in the product. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it was just one of those classic, like, here is Nintendo trying to be innovative, but the execution is horrible.
Well, the
So I'll
craziest one
finish.
too. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just, the last part that I'll say, and then you can go, is that I believe this is not a mistake. This is just a small failure for
Mhm.
Nintendo's part, because, like, basically they did it. They gave up on it. They took it offline. They never released something saying, "Hey guys, we're going to, stop making this." So to me, it's just a small failure. We tried it, it didn't work. It's not a big mistake because they didn't lose that much money on it. Now you go.
Oh, I was just gonna say I completely forgot about this until I just started thinking about Labo now. And you remember they had one where it was like you had like a cardboard backpack, you had a visor, and you had like strings connected down to your feet and onto you did like robot boxing. And I remember looking at that thing. I would break that thing in the first hour. So I don't know. That
Yeah.
just goes on to more of the longevity of the product. So, but like you said, literally the note I wrote for this was I was like, "But how much did this really cost Nintendo at the end of the day?" It's kind of the same thing as just having one of their games flop. It's gonna happen. It's almost written into their business plan at this point that like, okay, unexpectedly, not all these games are gonna be a success. So
Yeah.
we have to budget in for some flops. Um,
Yeah. And it's also a result of just being like, trying to be innovative, but just trying to be too it's just a little bit too soon.
mhm.
We could very well see AR VR implementation in the next Switch system, but like once again, it's like seeing like the Virtual Boy in the '90s. Like,
Yeah.
could the same thing have worked later? But like we're still today not even necessarily at that point with technology.
Yeah, it
So
seems like something they were toying around with in the Nintendo Labs, and somebody saw it one day and they were like, you know what? Screw it, sell it, see what happens. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, I
yeah.
don't think there was a lot of, I don't think there was a big plan behind it. I think it looks like it was all still in the testing phase.
And I guess I will add too that I do love the idea of the edutainment side of it as well. Like
Mhm.
if Nintendo does want to legit get into games where kids can experiment with coding and things like that, do it. Please do it because I think that's all really cool and something that you know certain places are falling behind in. So yeah, yeah. I mean, to be a small failure, not a real big mistake. The other one on this list is so interesting.
Yeah,
Like
because first off, it kind of is like, bad form on Nintendo's part. I mean, I understand they're a business at the end of the day, but to go behind Sony's back and start working with Philips, it's completely understandable why Sony was like, "Hey, you were making a system with us. What happened here?" Um, and I'm sure they were upfront with Sony about saying things like, well, if you are going to have control over the CD elements of this machine, that's not something we're comfortable with. We're not comfortable with Sony making a Mario game just because we're putting it on the CD format. You have final say over us on a Mario game. Not going to happen. Um, so that was one of the reasons they went to Philips, and it's funny because it seems like when they were over at Philips, they didn't try any quality control at all. Uh, although I think we talked about in that segment, that was also another thing that happened was they lost the final say on those games as well. So um, yeah, it was just I don't know why Nintendo didn't just develop the CD stuff themselves at the time. I don't know enough about how hardware works to figure that part out for myself, but I know Sony was a juggernaut at the time in this type of thing. So
this has to be the biggest what if on this list, and
yeah,
it's just in general like one of the biggest what ifs in gaming history. Like this decision, if it goes differently, could potentially change. Like
yeah. If there's no
things could look,
PlayStation, there an Xbox? Because
things could look, yeah,
Microsoft was motivated by seeing what Sony did, and did Dreamcast sell better? I think it almost certainly sold better without PlayStation.
yeah,
So you might even still have Sega systems around.
yeah, yeah. This like one decision or mistake, if we call it, is potentially like one of the biggest in video game history.
Or
Where
if you believe
like
in fate, would the timeline have corrected itself eventually anyway? Would Sony have worked with Nintendo on this one machine, and then would they have gone on the next generation to release their own, and maybe not call it PlayStation, but the Sony game system, and they ended up doing what they did anyway, you know?
so, I'm going to bring up a very similar question next week when we talk about Rare, but I mean it's impossible to know, but it's a fun podcast question. I mean, was this mistake an overall positive for the gaming industry? Because obviously PlayStation brought a lot of important, great things into the video game world. So, I mean, is overall like we'll never know, but could this be a good mistake for the gaming industry?
Yeah, it's now that you mention it from that point of view too, PlayStation definitely did things completely differently. Like if you go back to the previous generation, like there's Nintendo's way of looking at things and there's Sega's way of looking at things. And then you had like the TurboGrafx 16 in the background or something that nobody's even looking at. But you had those two things, those two like philosophies on games, and then PlayStation comes in, and it's like a third philosophy. It's like it's almost a third personality in the gaming world. I think that led to a lot of their success as well, as they definitely had their own identity going. PlayStation wasn't like the new Sega or like the new or Nintendo or anything like that. So having their own personality helped them build a fan base and helped them sell units, and they went on to their success. And like I said, I'm pretty sure they inspired Microsoft to start Xbox. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
and,
snowball
and,
effect for
and, and
sure.
just put and then just push like just elevate the video game wars even more. Like we could, I mean, this is a whole, we could do a whole episode on this, but like, I mean, just like, yeah,
Well, it
Sega looks
sounds like we'll be
different.
talking about it more because it looks like that's
Mhm.
moving on to the next round.
Yeah. I mean, Sega looks different. The GameCube looks different. Everything looks different. And last part that I'll say is, if you're interested in weird video game history, definitely do some reading on this one. The man, I think there's only one in existence, and the man who bought the PlayStation bought it at an auction for $75. He did not know what he was buying, but he bought it at an auction like 7 years ago for $75. The price, the possible price of this is unknown.
Yeah.
Like, is it hundreds of thousands? Is it millions? And a lot of people are saying, well, it shouldn't be in this guy's attic. It should really be in a
Indiana
museum
Jones.
somewhere.
Yeah. Indiana
Yeah,
Jones. That belongs in a
like
museum.
I agree, but at the same time, like I always feel like I feel the same way when someone like catches like a huge like home run ball and they just give it back to the player. I'd be like, can I get like a vacation or something? Like, can I get like, you know, I'm happy for you, but can I get some kind of monetary something out of it? Because I'd feel the same way. Like, if I had the Holy Grail and they're like, just give it to museum, I'd be like, can I benefit from it some way? I might be too selfish, but you know what I mean.
And I think that's going to be the time we have this week. Sorry for those of you who are tuning in for Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but unfortunately, life still keeps happening. Maybe we can start recording earlier or something. We'll talk about that off the air. Because we run long a lot, and I go straight from this to work, and work doesn't want me coming in late because I record a podcast. So if you're out there listening and you want to change my job's mind on that, no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, did you have anything else you wanted to add this week before I start doing our outros here? We're going to do Sonic the Hedgehog 2 next week. We're going to continue this tournament with Sean, hopefully next week, and finally talk about the Super Mario Brothers movie 1993 versus Nintendo not buying Rare. And then we'll be done with the first, what do you call it? The first, not bracket, the first stage of our tournament here.
Right. I think if we were doing like Puyo Puyo 2, I think we could do it, but Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is kind of a massive game.
Yes.
So yeah, and I didn't get to, we have a new soundboard. I did not
Oh
get to
yeah, we
use
could
it.
load it up with Sonic the Hedgehog sound effects for next week.
But so I'm going to use it right now. I'm using it one time before we end this episode. I'm doing it right now. That's all. That's all I got.
That's my favorite one, the duck. That's staying.
All right.
All right, so thank you all for listening. Come back next week to hear us talk about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Genesis. And if you want to get to us to message us, we have email nintendotherapypod@gmail.com. We have a comment section down below because we're on YouTube now. So if you're listening to us there, comment something down there that you liked us. Special password, Sonic next time, all one word. And what else are we on? We're on everything. And if we're not there, tell us we're not there and we'll go there. And yeah, spread the word. That's the best thing you can do. I haven't said this in a while. Leave us a review and tell a friend to listen to the show. Those are the two best things you can do for us. We are not running ads on this show. We don't have a Patreon. We're not trying to make any kind of financial gains. We just want people to listen. So spread the word. That's the best thing you could do for us. Until next week, we will be playing Nintendo and coming up with new things to say. See you then.
Woo!